guys are all really confused. And so, to help that, I'm going to explain to you what my project is going to be about. My project is basically about the Zoroastrians, and I'm pretty sure most of you, at least, have never heard that before in your life. Totally fine. The Zoroastrians are actually, they're not a race, but they were a group of people who had adopted the Zoroastrian religion, and there were plenty of them back in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, and even 6th century. But today, we have roughly about 200,000 in the world, and that's pretty much it. But the Zoroastrians, they originated mostly in the Persian Empire. Again, you probably haven't heard much about the Persian Empire either. But what we're going to talk about today is the Zoroastrians fleeing the Persian Empire after the Islamic Arab army came and took over. So let's start our presentation. We'll continue with the rest. The Persians actually lost a battle called the Battle of Al-Qadisiyah in 637 against the Islamic Arab army. They had withstood this army for several years, but after several years and several battles, they lost. And therefore, the Islamic Arab army took over the Persian Empire for a while. When this happened, the Zoroastrians, they weren't treated very well. They were forced to pay a tax called jizya that the Muslims who were living in the Persian Empire at the time did not have to pay because they were Muslims. Also, the Zoroastrians' fire temples were destroyed and mosques were built in their place. So they felt discriminated against, and it was a really bad time for them. So they decided to migrate to India in hope that their life will get a little better. And they did this through the Strait of Hormuz, which is a narrow, strategically important waterway between the Gulf of Oman and the Persian Gulf. So let's take a look at this picture. Okay, do you guys see that arrow on the upper right corner? Yep, that's exactly where we're talking about. Alright, so after the invasion of the Islamic Arab army, the Zoroastrians were practically forced to leave their country, or their empire to say. And they decided to move to India, as we said it, and pretty much they all did. No matter what age, no matter if you were single, if you had a family, if you were male or female, pretty much every single Zoroastrian fled the Persian Empire. Either they fled or they had decided to convert, but if they didn't want to convert, they had to leave because the conditions were absolutely horrible. So they became refugees, and most of them went to Western India. So before we go any further, I want to point out the relationship between Persian Empire and India. India was right next to the Persian Empire, and you can see why the Zoroastrians would choose to settle in Western India instead of anywhere else, because it was the closest to where they were living at. So, and during their time, during the 7th century, they really didn't have the resources or the opportunity to be able to go anywhere else other than the closest country nearby. So look at this and we'll be right back. If you look at the map right now, you can see the Persian Empire during the 7th century, and the Zoroastrians moved from the Persian Empire to India. If you look to the right of the Persian Empire, you will see India. And it was really difficult for them for the most part in the beginning. For about 20 years, the first 20 years, they lived in great difficulty. They didn't know the new language, they weren't really welcomed, and it was horrible. Eventually, they did learn the local language, and they presented their case to Jadi Rana, the Hindu king of the region they were staying in. And after presenting their case, Jadi Rana decided to promise them that they would be allowed to settle in his kingdom. So they finally had a home again. Well, yay to Jadi Rana for saving the day and helping out the Zoroastrians in settling down. They finally settled down in a place called Sanjan, which was 100 miles from Bombay, Bombay being the capital of India. And they've been living there forever now. They've been in India, and they are the ancestors of today's Parsis in India. So that's pretty much our story about the Zoroastrians and their migration from the Persian Empire to Western India. If you have any more questions, feel free to Google it. Thanks for watching, guys. Bye.